So it's 2016 and two of the most popular and successful active film franchises today are Star Trek and Star Wars. What a time to be alive. Star Trek Beyond. So Star Trek Beyond is the latest installment in the JJ vs. Star Trek films, except this time it's directed by Justin Lin, the director who essentially saved the Fast and Furious franchise. Every character in the Enterprise that you expect to return makes the return in this movie, except this time they're on a mission to go into the galaxy and save some crew that needs some help, except it turns out to be an ambush. The Enterprise gets shipwrecked on this nearby planet, and half the crew, which is conveniently comprised of only the main characters, gets separated, while the other half gets captured by the main villain, Krall, played by Idris Elba. And the reason why Krall shot down the Enterprise in the first place is because he's looking for this artifact that contains some type of power that can create some massive destruction. So before the resurrection of the Star Trek cinematic universe back in 2009, I wasn't a Star Trek fan whatsoever. However, I have thoroughly enjoyed this new series of movies that have been coming out. Not to the point where I fell in love with them and get super excited for the announcement of a next movie, but enough to realize that these movies are going to be good no matter what. And I feel like probably a big reason why I don't get excited for these new Star Trek movies coming out is because I don't know what's to come. I don't know what directions they can take it in. In Star Wars, I generally know which direction they could go in and what stories they could bring out. Star Trek, I have no idea. Now, I really wasn't excited for this movie at all because the marketing and the trailers for this movie were so poor and uncaptivating. But because I did enjoy the last two, I expected this movie to at least be good. Which it is. But if I'm gonna be completely honest, this movie was a tad underwhelming for me. This movie is everything that you're expecting it to be, which is equally good and bad. On one hand, it's this super fun and super cool summer blockbuster, and then on the other hand, it's this relatively thin and kind of unoriginal sci-fi movie. But there is definitely a lot to enjoy in this movie, especially if you're a Star Trek or sci-fi fan. There's incredible cinematic set pieces and firefights and explosions. I mean, basically everything that you're expecting and wanting out of a summer action sci-fi movie. One of the coolest things I thought that they did in this movie was that they gave us an in-depth look of the Enterprise. I mean, they actually showed us the interior and just how big that this ship was. And they humanized it in a sense. They were able to actually humanize the voyage and show that this is a living, breathing community where people are living, not just working for the sake of science. As expected, all of the performances in this movie were solid, with some characters getting some more emphasis and screen time than they were given before. Karl Urban as Bones and Zachary Quinto as Spock had great chemistry throughout this movie and were given a lot of the comedic relief. And this was definitely a byproduct of Simon Pegg having a hand in actually writing the script for this one. An interesting approach that they took in this movie when they separated the crew is that they actually paired up duos that you wouldn't necessarily see together on screen. And I absolutely love this. The last thing I wanted to see was another movie of Kirk and Spock just taking it all on themselves. This time we get Kirk and Chekhov, and then we get Scotty and this rogue alien warrior named Jayla, and then the best duo in the entire movie, Bones and Spock. The script for this movie was really funny and entertaining, especially with all these new interactions that we're seeing. But there were a lot of parts in this movie where they're just spewing a whole bunch of scientific stuff in reference to the technology that they're using and what's going on that you just don't understand. And this would have been fine if they made some type of small effort to explain what they're talking about along the way, rather than just leaving you in the dark to be like, wait, huh? What? Okay. Just keep going. No, it's okay. Now for me, there were a lot of glaring issues with this movie that may or may not have been remedied if I was a bigger fan. But if this movie's trying to stand on its own, which every movie should, then this shouldn't matter. My biggest gripe with this movie is that I felt very little tension and very little urgency at all. And honestly, I didn't really care if anything happened to any of these characters. And this really shouldn't make sense because the circumstance is literally putting thousands of people in danger, but they're all nameless and faceless, and I just really didn't care if anything happened. A large part of this issue comes from the fact that the crew lands on this supposed dangerous planet and that they have to hurry to find each other so that they can survive and find the rest of their crew. But then in the course of about, 15 minutes, they find each other and they're ready to go find the rest of them. There is not much character depth throughout this movie, as most of the new developments are shown at the beginning and at the end of the movie, with no substance in between. There needs to be much better explanation and backstory for characters such as Jayla and Krall, as well as for other items such as, the really powerful artifact. Also, although Krall is well acted and super cool, he's one of the least intimidating villains of this year. Until the end, his motivations are unclear, and even when those reasons are revealed, they're nothing compelling enough to elicit a polarizing response. The surface level central conflict in this film is essentially non-existent because of this. If anything, they should have focused more on the internal struggles of the crew and their relationships with one another. They showed a little bit at the beginning with Kirk and Spock that was super interesting, but then nothing is really done with it. Another thing that I didn't like that really surprised me about this movie was actually the directing. I really wasn't a fan of the oversaturated use of shaky cam, especially during action sequences that just made it really hard to follow. And there was one technical aspect in this movie that absolutely killed me. there are an absurd number of poorly lit scenes in this movie. There are multiple moments where I couldn't make out what was going on screen because it was just so poorly lit. And this was especially frustrating during the fight sequences and during scenes that were in daylight. That's the last time you want to be doing this. Justin Lin is a good director, but following up J.J. Abrams, he just kind of fell short for me. In the end, guys, Star Trek Beyond is a fun summer movie for lovers of the franchise, especially with all those pieces of fan service just sprinkled throughout. If you're looking for a movie that's action-packed and you just want to sit back and not think too much about it, well, this movie's right up your alley. And for all these reasons, I'm going to give Star Trek Beyond a 7 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. It truly does mean a lot. If you like this video, don't forget to drop a like. And if you want to see my upcoming movie reviews and you want to stick around, hit subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one.